Hey everyone, I'm Lauren Harris, a 28-year-old finance strategist living in the heart of New York City. This story isn't one I ever thought I'd share. It's raw, it's painful, and it's deeply personal. But it's a story I need to tell, because it's about a journey that changed everything I thought I knew about myself. For years, I chased my dad's approval, believing if I worked hard enough, achieved enough, he'd finally see me. But a secret buried deep in my family unraveled it all, and what I found set me free. This is my truth. Growing up, I believed love was something you earned. My dad, Richard Matthews, was a towering figure, a real estate mogul who valued success above everything, even family. I thought if I pushed myself harder, I could win his pride, maybe even his love. So I poured everything into my career. I clawed my way up at Goldman Sachs, becoming their youngest senior investment strategist at 28. With my first big bonus, I bought him a $120,000 Mercedes S-Class, hoping it would finally make him see me as worthy. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. His coldness cut deeper each time, leaving scars I didn't understand. Then, at our annual family reunion, everything shattered. The night was supposed to be a celebration, but it became the moment my world flipped upside down. If you've ever felt invisible to someone who should love you unconditionally, this story is for you. It's about the pain of rejection, the weight of secrets, and the strength to walk away from what doesn't serve you. My journey isn't just mine, it might be yours too, and I'm here to share what I learned. I wasn't sure about sharing this story until last week, when a therapy session changed my perspective. I've spent years hiding the hurt, pretending the rejection didn't sting, but opening up in that session felt like shedding a weight I'd carried forever. It was scary, terrifying, even, to face those raw emotions, but it was also freeing. For the first time, I saw my story not as a wound, but as a source of strength. That's why I'm here, speaking to you now. I want you to know that your worth isn't tied to someone else's approval, no matter how much you love them. If someone dims your light, if they can't see the brilliance you bring, that's their failure, not yours. This story is my way of reclaiming my voice, of standing tall in a truth I once ran from. I hope it inspires you to value yourself, to hold your head high even when others try to pull you down. You are enough, just as you are, and no one gets to define your worth but you. My journey taught me that, and I'm sharing it to remind you of the same. So, stick with me to hear what happened that night at the family reunion, a night that broke my heart but rebuilt my soul. It's a story of betrayal, courage, and finding family in unexpected places. If this resonates with you, if you've ever fought to be seen, please hit that like button and subscribe to join me on this journey. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your stories too. Let's dive into this together, because sometimes, the hardest truths lead to the greatest freedom. Here we go. I grew up in a wealthy Boston suburb, in a house that looked like it belonged on a postcard, red brick, white shutters, manicured lawn. To outsiders, we were the perfect American family, the kind people envied. But inside those walls, it was a different story. My dad, Richard Matthews, wasn't just a father, he was a force. He'd built a real estate empire from nothing, turning modest beginnings into a multi-million-dollar legacy. To him, success wasn't just a goal, it was everything. Status, respect, the right connections, those were his currency, far more valuable than family dinners or bedtime stories. I learned early that love in our house came with conditions. You had to earn it, prove you were worthy of the Matthews name. Every achievement was weighed, measured, and usually found wanting. Dad's world was one of winners and losers, and he made sure we knew which side we stood on. His voice, sharp and commanding, could fill a room with expectations so heavy they pressed down on your chest. I remember watching him at his desk, signing contracts, his pen moving like it was carving his legacy into stone. That was the man I longed to impress, the man whose approval felt like the key to belonging. But no matter how hard I tried, the the door to his pride always seemed locked. I didn't understand why then, but I felt it, deep, aching, like a bruise you can't see but can't ignore. That house, so perfect from the outside, was where I learned to chase a love that always slipped through my fingers. From my earliest memories, Dad was never the father who showed up to school plays or cheered at soccer games. Those moments were for other kids, whose parents clapped and smiled no matter the outcome. Instead, he was the critic who saw every flaw. A B+ on a math test? Why not an A, Lauren? You're smarter than that. A second-place ribbon at a track meet? Second place is just the first loser, he'd say, his voice cold, like he was stating a fact of nature. Those words cut deep, planting doubts that grew with every year. My mom, Ellen, was different when he wasn't around. She'd hug me, tell me she was proud, her warmth like a brief ray of sunlight. But in his presence, she'd shrink, her eyes darting to him as if seeking permission to speak. She never challenged his criticism, never stood up when his words left me stinging. I used to wonder why she stayed silent. Did she agree with him, or was she just too afraid to fight? Looking back, I see she was trapped in her own way, caught in his orbit, just like me. But as a kid, all I knew was the loneliness of trying to be enough for a man who seemed to look right through me. Every report card, every award, was a chance to win him over, but it was like running a race with no finish line. The harder I tried, the further away his approval felt, and the deeper that ache in my chest grew. My older brother, Michael, was the golden child, the son who could do no wrong. He was 3 years older, tall and athletic, with a smile that won everyone over. He played football, captained the team, and followed Dad's path like it was written in the stars, same high school, same college, straight into the family real estate business. To Dad, Michael was the embodiment of the Matthews legacy, proof that his empire would endure. Every touchdown, every deal Michael closed, earned a clap on the shoulder and a proud, "That's my boy." I watched those moments with a mix of awe and envy, wondering what it felt like to be seen that way. My younger sister, Emily, 2 years behind me, had her own magic. She wasn't the overachiever Michael was, but she had this gift for reading Dad's moods, knowing when to charm him with a laugh or slip into the background when his temper flared. She was the peacemaker, the one who could soften his edges, make him smile when no one else could. But me? I was the odd one out, always guessing wrong, always falling short. I'd stay up late studying, hoping a perfect test score would earn a nod of approval, but it never came. Dad would glance at my achievements, then pivot to Michael's latest deal or Emily's community work, as if my efforts were invisible. I didn't understand why I couldn't crack his code, why my victories never measured up. It wasn't just that I wasn't enough, it was like I was playing a game rigged against me from the start. That feeling of being an outsider in my own family gnawed at me, a quiet pain I carried through every milestone, every hope that maybe, just maybe, I'd finally be enough. I'll never forget the day I was 12, clutching a state math award, my heart racing with pride. I'd worked so hard, stayed up nights practicing, dreaming of the moment I'd show Dad. I ran to his study, certificate in hand, sure this would be the thing to make him see me. "Dad, I won," I said, holding it up like a trophy. He barely looked up from his papers, his glasses reflecting the desk lamp. "Numbers don't make legacies, Lauren," he said, his voice flat, dismissive. "You need to think bigger." My chest tightened, the pride draining out of me like air from a punctured balloon. That moment stuck, a splinter I couldn't pull out. It wasn't just about the award, it was the realization that nothing I did would ever be enough. From then on, every choice I made was about proving him wrong. I pushed myself harder, stayed up later, took on extra projects at school, all to show I wasn't the failure he seemed to think I was. But it came at a cost. I sacrificed sleep, friendships, moments of joy, all for a goal that kept moving further away. Looking back, I see how that day shaped me, how it drove me to chase validation I'd never get. It wasn't about the math award or even about me, it was about a man who couldn't give what I needed most. That splinter stayed with me, pushing me to build a life that screamed success, hoping one day he'd notice. But deep down, I was still that 12-year-old girl, holding a certificate, waiting for a father who'd never show up. At 28, I'd carved out a place for myself in a world that didn't hand out wins easily. I'd made it at Goldman Sachs, becoming their youngest senior investment strategist, a title I'd fought for through sleepless nights and relentless hustle. The promotion came with a salary that felt like proof I'd finally escaped the shadow of my dad's impossible standards. For the first time, I had the means to do something big, something that might bridge the gap between us. So I decided to buy him a Mercedes S-Class, a sleek black beast that screamed success. It cost $120,000, nearly a year's salary, a number that made my stomach twist when I signed the papers. But in my heart, I believed it was worth it. Maybe this would be the gesture that made him see me, really see me, not as the daughter who always fell short, but as someone worthy of his pride. I'd spent my life chasing that moment, the one where his eyes would soften, where he'd say, "I'm proud of you, Lauren." The car wasn't just a gift, it was a plea, a desperate hope wrapped in leather and chrome. I told myself it was for him, but deep down, I knew it was for me, for the little girl still waiting for her dad's love. As I planned the surprise, I felt a flicker of hope, fragile but stubborn, that this time, things would be different. That this time, he'd see the woman I'd become and finally let me in. The day before our family reunion, I drove the Mercedes to my parents' house, my hands gripping the wheels so tight my knuckles turned white. The car purred smoothly, a stark contrast to the storm of nerves inside me. I'd rehearsed this moment for weeks, how I'd hand over the keys, how I'd smile through the anxiety, how I'd watch his face light up. But when I pulled into the driveway, reality hit hard. Dad answered the door, his crisp button-down shirt immaculate even on a Saturday. "You're early," he said, his tone clipped, like I'd interrupted something important. I swallowed the lump in my throat and handed him the small box with the Mercedes emblem. "It's your Father's Day gift," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. His eyes widened for a split second, shock, maybe, but then they narrowed, skeptical. "What are you trying to prove, Lauren?" he asked, stepping outside. He circled the car like it was a business deal he didn't trust, inspecting every curve, every detail. His questions came rapid fire. "How do you finance this? What's the interest rate?" It wasn't gratitude, it was an interrogation. I stood there, heart sinking, trying to hold on to the hope I'd carried all the way from New York. But his words stung, each one chipping away at the dream I'd built around this moment. I'd given him a piece of my soul wrapped in $120,000, and he was treating it like a contract he hadn't signed. After a brief test drive, Dad pulled the Mercedes into the garage, not the driveway where tomorrow's guests might see it. The gesture felt deliberate, like he was hiding my effort, tucking it away where it wouldn't draw attention. He climbed out, keys dangling in his hand, and tossed out a "thanks" that landed like an accusation. "You must be doing well to waste money like this," he said, his voice laced with something I couldn't quite name, disapproval, maybe, or resentment. The words hit me like a slap, stealing the air from my lungs. I mumbled something about needing to check in at my hotel and left, my legs heavy, my chest tight. In the car, alone, I fought back tears, the kind that burn because they're born of years of trying and failing. Why had I thought this would be different? Why did I keep handing him pieces of myself, hoping he'd cherish them? The hotel room felt colder than it should have, the city lights outside mocking my naivety. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my reflection in the dark window, wondering what was wrong with me. I'd built a career most people only dreamed of, bought a gift that screamed success, and still, I was invisible to him. The ache I'd carried since childhood grew sharper, a reminder that no amount of money or achievement could buy the love I'd been chasing. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but all I could do was sit with the weight of my own broken hope. That night, I called my best friend, Sarah, my voice trembling as I recounted the day. She listened quietly, the way she always did when I needed to unravel. When I finished, she didn't hesitate. "Take the car back, Lauren," she said, her voice firm. "He doesn't deserve it. He doesn't deserve you." I laughed it off, a hollow sound that didn't fool either of us. "It's not that simple," I said, but deep down, her words struck a chord. She was right. I was chasing a love that Richard Matthews would never give, pouring my heart into a void that only grew deeper. Sarah's voice softened, but her warning was clear: "You're worth more than this. Don't let him keep breaking you." I hung up, her words echoing in the silence of my hotel room. In my purse, tucked beneath my wallet, was an envelope I hadn't dared to open since I'd gotten the results. A DNA test, taken on a whim, had revealed a secret that explained everything: why I'd always been the outsider, why his love stopped at my siblings. I traced the edge of the envelope, my fingers trembling. It was a truth I wasn't ready to face, not yet, but it was there, waiting, a ticking bomb that could shatter the fragile world I'd built around my family. I didn't know then that the next day would force my hand, that the reunion would push me to a breaking point. All I knew was that I was tired of chasing, tired of hurting, tired of believing I could ever be enough for a man who'd already decided I wasn't. At 28, I'd carved out a place for myself in a world that didn't hand out wins easily. I'd made it at Goldman Sachs, becoming their youngest senior investment strategist, a title I'd fought for through sleepless nights and relentless hustle. The promotion came with a salary that felt like proof I'd finally escaped the shadow of my dad's impossible standards. For the first time, I had the means to do something big, something that might bridge the gap between us. So I decided to buy him a Mercedes S-Class, a sleek black beast that screamed success. It cost $120,000, nearly a year's salary, a number that made my stomach twist when I signed the papers. But in my heart, I believed it was worth it. Maybe this would be the gesture that made him see me, really see me, not as the daughter who always fell short, but as someone worthy of his pride. I'd spent my life chasing that moment, the one where his eyes would soften, where he'd say, "I'm proud of you, Lauren." The car wasn't just a gift, it was a plea, a desperate hope wrapped in leather and chrome. I told myself it was for him, but deep down, I knew it was for me, for the little girl still waiting for her dad's love. As I planned the surprise, I felt a flicker of hope, fragile but stubborn, that this time, things would be different. That this time, he'd see the woman I'd become and finally let me in. The day before our family reunion, I drove the Mercedes to my parents' house, my hands gripping the wheels so tight my knuckles turned white. The car purred smoothly, a stark contrast to the storm of nerves inside me. I'd rehearsed this moment for weeks, how I'd hand over the keys, how I'd smile through the anxiety, how I'd watch his face light up. But when I pulled into the driveway, reality hit hard. Dad answered the door, his crisp button-down shirt immaculate even on a Saturday. "You're early," he said, his tone clipped, like I'd interrupted something important. I swallowed the lump in my throat and handed him the small box with the Mercedes emblem. "It's your Father's Day gift," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. His eyes widened for a split second, shock, maybe, but then they narrowed, skeptical. "What are you trying to prove, Lauren?" he asked, stepping outside. He circled the car like it was a business deal he didn't trust, inspecting every curve, every detail. His questions came rapid fire. "How do you finance this? What's the interest rate?" It wasn't gratitude, it was an interrogation. I stood there, heart sinking, trying to hold on to the hope I'd carried all the way from New York. But his words stung, each one chipping away at the dream I'd built around this moment. I'd given him a piece of my soul wrapped in $120,000, and he was treating it like a contract he hadn't signed. After a brief test drive, Dad pulled the Mercedes into the garage, not the driveway where tomorrow's guests might see it. The gesture felt deliberate, like he was hiding my effort, tucking it away where it wouldn't draw attention. He climbed out, keys dangling in his hand, and tossed out a "thanks" that landed like an accusation. "You must be doing well to waste money like this," he said, his voice laced with something I couldn't quite name, disapproval, maybe, or resentment. The words hit me like a slap, stealing the air from my lungs. I mumbled something about needing to check in at my hotel and left, my legs heavy, my chest tight. In the car, alone, I fought back tears, the kind that burn because they're born of years of trying and failing. Why had I thought this would be different? Why did I keep handing him pieces of myself, hoping he'd cherish them? The hotel room felt colder than it should have, the city lights outside mocking my naivety. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my reflection in the dark window, wondering what was wrong with me. I'd built a career most people only dreamed of, bought a gift that screamed success, and still, I was invisible to him. The ache I'd carried since childhood grew sharper, a reminder that no amount of money or achievement could buy the love I'd been chasing. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but all I could do was sit with the weight of my own broken hope. That night, I called my best friend, Sarah, my voice trembling as I recounted the day. She listened quietly, the way she always did when I needed to unravel. When I finished, she didn't hesitate. "Take the car back, Lauren," she said, her voice firm. "He doesn't deserve it. He doesn't deserve you." I laughed it off, a hollow sound that didn't fool either of us. "It's not that simple," I said, but deep down, her words struck a chord. She was right, I was chasing a love that Richard Matthews would never give, pouring my heart into a void that only grew deeper. Sarah's voice softened, but her warning was clear: "You're worth more than this. Don't let him keep breaking you." I hung up, her words echoing in the silence of my hotel room. In my purse, tucked beneath my wallet, was an envelope I hadn't dared to open since I'd gotten the results. A DNA test, taken on a whim, had revealed a secret that explained everything: why I'd always been the outsider, why his love stopped at my siblings. I traced the edge of the envelope, my fingers trembling. It was a truth I wasn't ready to face, not yet, but it was there, waiting, a ticking bomb that could shatter the fragile world I'd built around my family. I didn't know then that the next day would force my hand, that the reunion would push me to a breaking point. All I knew was that I was tired of chasing, tired of hurting, tired of believing I could ever be enough for a man who'd already decided I wasn't. The Matthews family reunion was always a spectacle, a carefully choreographed performance that was as much about Richard Matthews as it was about family. Held every June at my parents' sprawling Boston estate, it was part gathering, part showcase of my dad's empire. Luxury cars, BMWs, Audis, Porsches, lined the maple-shaded driveway, their polished chrome glinting in the summer sun. Business associates in tailored suits mingled with relatives, their laughter loud but hollow, like they were all playing parts in Dad's grand production. Inside, Mom's decor was flawless, crystal chandeliers casting soft light, fresh flowers in precise arrangements, antique furniture that screamed wealth but felt cold to the touch. Every detail was designed to impress, to uphold the Matthews name as a symbol of success. But beneath the polished surface, tension simmered. I felt it the moment I stepped through the front door, my heels clicking on the marble foyer. This wasn't a place for warmth or vulnerability, it was a stage where everyone knew their role: smile, nod, don't disrupt the illusion. Dad moved through the crowd like a king, his handshake firm, his smile calculated, commanding attention without effort. Mom played her part too, greeting guests with practiced grace, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease, like she knew the script could unravel at any moment. I'd spent years dreading these reunions, each one a reminder of my place in the family hierarchy, always on the outside, always striving to belong. As I smoothed my navy dress, chosen to signal success without arrogance, I braced myself for the performance ahead, hoping this year might be different, that the Mercedes I'd given Dad would finally earn me a place in his spotlight. But deep down, a quiet voice warned me, no matter how perfect the stage, some roles can't be rewritten. Dad had moved the Mercedes to the front of the house, parking it where every arriving guest couldn't miss it. Its black paint gleamed under the afternoon sun, a monument to success, my success, though he'd never say it. I watched from the foyer as he led a group of his associates to the car, gesturing animatedly, pointing out its features like a proud owner. "Quite an upgrade," he said, his voice carrying through the open window, and their nods of approval made my chest tighten. Not once did he mention me, not a single word about the daughter who'd spent a year's salary to give him this gift. It was as if I'd vanished, my effort erased, rewritten as his triumph. At dinner, the grand dining room was a sea of faces, relatives, associates, all seated at a mahogany table that stretched forever. Dad sat at the head, commanding the room as waiters served seared scallops with military precision. Then came his speech, a reunion tradition that always felt more like a corporate address than a family moment. He stood, brandy glass in hand, his voice smooth and authoritative. He praised Michael first, my older brother, for his latest real estate deal, a risky project turned profitable. "That's the Matthews instinct," Dad said, beaming. Next was Emily, my younger sister, lauded for her charity work with the Children's Hospital Board. "She brings prestige to our name," he declared, and Emily's shy smile glowed under his approval. They were the pride of the Matthews legacy, the children who reflected his glory. I sat at the far end of the table, my fork heavy in my hand, waiting for my name, hoping for a scrap of recognition. But his gaze slid past me, as if I were part of the decor, expensive, but irrelevant. The omission wasn't new, but it hurt just the same, a familiar wound reopening with surgical precision. Then he looked at me. For a fleeting moment, my heart lifted, foolishly hoping for something kind, something that would make the years of striving worth it. I braced myself, gripping my napkin under the table, every muscle tense with anticipation. But his eyes narrowed, and his voice took on a cutting edge. "I'm proud of all my children," he said, pausing for effect, "except the loser." The words landed like a thunderclap, stealing the air from the room. Silence swallowed the clink of glasses, the murmur of conversation. Every eye turned to me, pinning me in place. He wasn't done. "Some people chase superficial achievements," he continued, his gaze locked on mine, titles, salaries, things that look good on paper but lack substance. "True success is about family legacy, building something that lasts, not running after personal glory." My face burned, a mix of shame and rage, as his words stripped away everything I'd fought for, Cornell, Goldman Sachs, the risk model I'd built from nothing. He called it all meaningless, a cheap bid for attention. The room stayed frozen, guests shifting uncomfortably, unsure if this was a joke or a public execution. My mother's sharp intake of breath was the only sound, her face pale across the table. Michael looked smug, Emily horrified, but no one spoke. I felt their stares, some pitying, some curious, all witnessing my humiliation. In that moment, I was 12 again, holding a math award, waiting for a father who'd never show up. But this wasn't just dismissal, it was a deliberate wound, crafted to remind me I'd never belong. My heart pounded, a drumbeat of hurt and defiance, and I realized something had shifted. His words didn't just break me, they woke me up. I wasn't the loser he saw, and I was done letting him define me. Earlier that evening, before dinner, I'd slipped into the hallway to catch my breath, needing a moment away from the suffocating performance of the reunion. That's when I overheard him, his voice drifting from the study, the door slightly ajar. He was talking to one of his associates, a man whose name I didn't care to know. "Lauren's always been a disappointment," he said, his tone matter-of-fact, like he was discussing a failed investment. "She's chasing status, titles, instead of legacy. Always trying to prove something, but she'll never get it." The words sliced through me, sharp and cold, like a knife twisting in an old wound. I pressed myself against the wall, my breath shallow, as he continued rewriting my life, my degree, my career, my sacrifices, as a desperate grab for attention. It wasn't just that he didn't see me, he'd decided I was unworthy, a flaw in his perfect family tapestry. I'd heard his criticism before, but this was different, raw, unguarded, the truth of how he saw me laid bare. When he called me a loser at dinner, it wasn't a surprise, it was confirmation. The room's silence after his speech felt endless, every stare a weight pressing down on me. Some looked away, embarrassed, others watched with morbid curiosity, like I was a character in a tragedy they couldn't stop reading. My cousin Rachel's hand brushed mine under the table, a silent gesture of support, but it barely registered. My mother's face was white, her knuckles tight around her napkin, but she didn't speak. No one did. The Matthews family theater demanded compliance, and I'd played my part for years, swallowing the hurt, smiling through the slights, believing if I tried harder, I'd earn my place. But in that moment, staring at the man who'd raised me but never loved me, I saw the truth. No achievement would ever be enough for him. Not the Mercedes, not my promotion, not the countless nights I'd spent proving I wasn't the failure he saw. His approval was a mirage, always just out of reach, and I'd spent my life running toward it, exhausting myself for a prize that didn't exist. The envelope in my purse, the DNA test I'd kept hidden, felt heavier now, its truth pulsing like a second heartbeat. I hadn't planned to use it, not yet, but his words had lit a fuse. I was done performing, done begging for a love that came with strings. Something inside me hardened, not into anger, but into clarity. I wasn't the loser he'd named, I was Lauren Harris, and I was enough. That realization, born in the wreckage of his cruelty, was the first step toward freedom. 3 months before that fateful reunion, I stumbled across a truth that turned my world upside down. It started innocently, a DNA test kit, a holiday gift from a friend, meant to uncover fun facts about ancestry. I swabbed my cheek, sent it off, and thought little of it until the results arrived. The numbers didn't add up. The paternal markers pointed to someone other than Richard Matthews, the man I'd called Dad for 28 years. At first, I thought it was a mistake, a lab error, anything but the impossible. But doubt gnawed at me, relentless, until I had to know for sure. Late one night, I crept into my parents' bathroom during a visit, my heart hammering as I plucked a few strands from his hairbrush. I sent them to a private lab, holding my breath for weeks, dreading the answer I already felt in my bones. When the confirmation came, Richard wasn't my biological father, it was like the ground vanished beneath me. Suddenly, everything made sense, why I'd always felt like an outsider in my own family, why his love seemed to stop at Michael and Emily, my siblings who mirrored his ambition, his charm. I was the puzzle piece that didn't fit, the child who carried another man's blood. His coldness, his endless criticism, the way he looked through me, it wasn't just disappointment, it was distance, a wall built by a secret I'd never known. I carried that envelope with the results everywhere, its weight heavier than paper, a truth I wasn't ready to face. It explained the ache I'd lived with, the rejection I could never escape, but it also terrified me. What would it mean to confront it? To upend the only family I'd ever known? For 3 months, I kept it hidden, but that night at the reunion, Richard's words pushed me to a breaking point where silence was no longer an option. At that moment, when Richard called me, the loser, in front of everyone, something inside me shattered, not my heart, but the chains I'd let bind me to his approval. His voice echoed in the silent dining room, his accusation hanging like smoke, choking the air. I felt every eye on me, the weight of their judgment, their pity, but for the first time, it didn't crush me. Instead, it fueled me. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. But my voice, when it came, was calm, steady, like a river carving through stone. "I'm not a loser, Dad," I said, locking eyes with him. I graduated top of my class at Cornell, fought my way to senior investment strategist at Goldman Sachs, and built a risk model that's used across the company. I've done things you'll never understand, things you'll never give me credit for. But you know what? I don't need you to. I'm done waiting for you to see me. The words poured out, each one a brick in a wall I was building between us, a wall to protect the woman I'd become. I saw his face shift, surprise, then anger, but I didn't flinch. For years, I'd let his criticism define me, let his dismissal make me question my worth. But standing there, I saw him for what he was, a man trapped by his own narrow vision, unable to love what didn't reflect his glory. My mother gasped softly, her hand at her throat. Michael's smirk faltered, Emily's eyes glistened with something like pride. The room was a blur of faces, but I didn't care. I was speaking for me, for the girl who'd spent 28 years trying to be enough. That moment wasn't just defiance, it was liberation, a declaration that my worth didn't depend on his gaze. I reached into my purse, my fingers brushing the envelope that had haunted me for months. It felt heavier than ever, a truth I'd carried like a stone in my chest. I pulled it out, the paper crisp and white, and placed it on the table in front of Richard. The room was so quiet I could hear my own pulse, a steady drumbeat of resolve. "Happy Father's Day, Dad," I said, my voice low but clear, each word deliberate. His eyes flicked to the envelope, confusion clouding his face, but I didn't wait for him to understand. I turned, my heels clicking on the hardwood, and walked out of the dining room, past the stunned faces, past the life I'd tried so hard to belong to. The Mercedes keys were in my hand, cool and solid, a symbol of my sacrifice now reclaimed. I stepped into the warm June night, the air thick with the scent of lilacs, and slid into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life, a sound that felt like my own awakening. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Richard burst through the front door, the envelope clutched in his hand. He shouted something, my name, maybe, or a curse, but the words were lost to the wind. His figure grew smaller, a man diminished not by my actions but by his own choices. For the first time in my life, I felt free, unburdened by the weight of his expectations, his rejection. The Mercedes carried me away, its headlights cutting through the darkness, but it wasn't just a car, it was my escape, my defiance, my proof that I could take back what I'd given to someone who'd never valued it. I drove toward Boston, the city lights blurring through tears I finally let fall, not from sadness but from release. I'd spent years building a life to please him, a house of cards that crumbled under his cruelty. But in that moment, I wasn't running from the wreckage, I was leaving it behind, choosing myself over a man who'd never chosen me. The envelope, now in his hands, held the truth of my origins, but it was my truth too, a key to understanding why I'd never fit in his world. As the miles stretched between us, I felt a quiet strength growing, a certainty that I was more than his daughter, more than his failure. I was Lauren Harris, and that was enough. The adrenaline was overwhelming, a wildfire racing through my veins, like I'd just burned down a house I'd spent 28 years building. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, but my heart was steady, alive with a clarity I'd never known. The city lights streaked past, each one a step away from the life I'd left behind. I wasn't running away from Richard, from the family reunion, or even from the pain of his words. I was running toward myself, toward the woman I'd always been, buried under years of striving, of trying to be someone worthy of a love that didn't have. The Mercedes hummed beneath me, no longer a plea for his approval but a symbol of my freedom. I'd given him everything, my heart, my achievements, my hope, and taken it all back in one decisive act. The road ahead wasn't clear, I didn't know what came next. But for the first time, that uncertainty didn't scare me. It felt like possibility, like space to build a life that was mine. I exhaled, the weight of his rejection lifting, and whispered to myself, "You're enough." In that moment, I believed it. That night, as I drove away from the Matthews estate, my phone lit up like a siren, 17 missed calls, 29 texts, each one a tether pulling me back to the chaos I'd left behind. I checked into a Boston hotel, the city's skyline glittering through my window, but I felt hollow, like I'd shed a skin I'd worn too long. I silenced my phone, but one message from Mom stopped me cold. In a trembling voicemail, she confirmed what the DNA test had revealed: she'd been pregnant by Thomas Keller, a college love, before she married Richard. She'd met Thomas at a lecture hall, his quiet intellect drawing her in, but their paths diverged when she chose stability over passion. Richard, ambitious and driven, promised to raise me as his own, to give us a life of security. But he couldn't keep that promise, not in his heart. Every time he looked at me, he saw another man's child, a reminder of a love that wasn't his. Mom's voice broke as she apologized, saying she'd hoped his resentment would fade, that he'd grow to love me as he did Michael and Emily. But it never did. Her words filled in the gaps of my childhood, the coldness, the criticism, the distance I'd never understood. I lay on the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, tears sliding silently into my hair. The truth hurt, but it also freed me. Richard's rejection wasn't my failure, it was his, a choice he made long before I could prove my worth. I wasn't the outsider I'd felt like, I was a child caught in a story that wasn't mine to fix. As the city hummed below, I let go of the guilt I'd carried, the belief that I'd somehow earned his disdain. For the first time, I saw myself clearly, and it was enough. A month later, I met Thomas Keller in New York, at a small cafe tucked away in Greenwich Village. I was nervous, my hands fidgeting with the coffee cup, unsure what to expect from the man whose blood ran through my veins. But when he walked in, tall, with graying hair and eyes that crinkled when he smiled, I felt an instant connection. He was kind, curious, asking about my life with a genuine interest that caught me off guard. He didn't see a title or a resume, he saw me, really saw me, in a way Richard never had. We talked for hours, discovering shared traits, an analytical mind, a love for solving complex problems, even the same quirky habit of tapping our fingers when deep in thought. Thomas didn't try to replace Richard or rewrite my past, he just listened, offering a quiet acceptance that felt like coming home. Meanwhile, Emily became my lifeline. She called daily, her voice a steady anchor as I navigated the fallout. She'd been horrified by Richard's cruelty at the reunion, and her support, fierce, unwavering, reminded me that family wasn't just blood. Therapy was another cornerstone, a space where I unraveled the knot of pain I'd carried for years. My therapist helped me see that my worth wasn't tied to Richard's approval, that his rejection was a reflection of his limitations, not mine. Slowly, I began to rebuild, not to prove anything to him, but to honor the woman I was becoming. Thomas, Emily, and therapy, they were my scaffolding, holding me up as I pieced together a new foundation. I wasn't erasing my past, I was claiming it, learning to love the parts of me that Richard had taught me to doubt. In those moments, I found a strength I didn't know I had, a quiet power rooted in self-acceptance. Fan 3, 402. 6 months after that night, I started a blog, pouring my story onto the page as a way to make sense of it all. I didn't expect anyone to read it, just a few paragraphs about the reunion, the DNA test, and the journey to healing. But the response was overwhelming. Hundreds of messages flooded my inbox, from strangers who'd faced similar rejection, who'd grown up chasing love that never came. A woman from Chicago wrote about her father's dismissal, how she'd found peace by setting boundaries. A man in Seattle shared his struggle with a step-parent who never accepted him. Each story was different, but the pain was universal, and so was the resilience. Reading their words, I realized I wasn't alone, my story was part of a larger tapestry, woven with threads of survival and hope. Those messages became my mirror, reflecting a truth I'd struggled to see: my worth didn't depend on Richard's validation, or anyone's. I was enough, not because of what I'd achieved, but because of who I was. 6 months later, I'm building a life that's mine, not to prove a point, not to silence Richard's voice in my head, but because I deserve it. I sold the Mercedes, using the money to invest in myself, a new apartment, a trip to clear my mind, a future free from his shadow. Emily and I are closer than ever, planning a quiet Thanksgiving away from the Matthews estate. Mom and I are talking, slowly rebuilding on honesty instead of secrets. Thomas is part of my life now, a gentle presence I'm learning to trust. This journey isn't over, but I'm no longer running from my past. I'm walking toward a future where I define my worth, where love doesn't come with conditions. And to anyone listening who's felt unseen, know this: you are enough, just as you are. Family isn't defined by blood, it's the people who see you for who you truly are, who lift you up when others tear you down. I learned that the hard way, but it's a truth I hold close now. I'm building that family, piece by piece, with Mom, who's learning to speak her truth, Emily, my sister, whose loyalty never wavered, Thomas, my biological father, whose quiet kindness showed me what acceptance feels like, and most importantly, myself, because I've finally learned to love the woman I am. If someone can't see your worth, if they diminish your light to make theirs shine brighter, walk away. It's not easy, leaving behind the familiar, the people you thought would love you forever, but it's necessary. You don't need their validation to be whole. You are enough, just as you are, with all your scars, your dreams, your resilience. My journey taught me that, and I hope it reminds you of the same. Choose the people who choose you, who see the beauty in your flaws, the strength in your struggles. That's the family worth building, the one that sets your soul free. Thank you for listening to my story, for sitting with me through the pain, the defiance, and the healing. It's not easy to bare your heart, but your presence here makes it worth it. If this moved you, if it stirred something in your soul, please hit that like button, subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss what's next. I want to hear from you. Share your story in the comments below. Have you ever stood up to someone who dismissed your worth? What gave you the courage to walk away? Your words might inspire someone else, just like you've inspired me. Next week, I'm sharing what happened when I met Thomas again, a moment that showed me family can be found in unexpected places. It's a story of connection, hope, and new beginnings, and I can't wait for you to hear it. Until then, keep shining, keep choosing yourself, and know that you're never alone in this journey. Thank you for being part of mine. I'll see you next time, right here, with another story from the heart.